Hey guys, welcome back to my channel, and today I'm going to do a bit of a different type of video, so stay tuned and see what's going on in today's video that's so different than my other types of videos. Hey guys, and welcome back. So, I like taking on religious fundamentalists. I like pointing out where things are just off, and I like calling them out on their bullshit. But today is not that video. So today I want to read a story to you guys where a girl gets some revenge on some religious types that have done some heinous type behaviors. I'm going to read a story to you guys. At the end of that story, we're going to talk about what happened in said story and discuss the ways in which it's just wrong. And am I surprised by what happens in this story, or is it just another one of those tales of where religious people are just doing what they normally do? So, the title of the story is called Girl's Foster Parents Spend Her Inheritance So She Donates Their Prized China Set. This is written by Susie Green and was posted on September 10th, 2019. So, let's go into it. It says, life isn't always fair, and people may hurt you, but instead of getting mad or crying about it, why not get even? After all, that's how an anonymous young girl, who we'll just call Sam, handled it. She was a young girl adopted by a foster family from the local church after her parents suddenly and tragically passed away. After years of mistreatment and heartache, Sam decided to give her foster family a dose of their own medicine. With a hint subtly, Sam completely outsmarted her foster parents, whom were entirely unaware of what was about to hit them. So let's meet who Sam is. Sam was a young girl who lived with her parents in a really small church-going town where everyone knew one another. Due to that fact, Sam's biological father had been the heir to a small fortune. He didn't really have to work. Sam's parents weren't really into big city life, so they opted for a cozy town instead. There they owned an antique shop, as Sam's mother was really into collecting antiques. Tragedy hits. Sam was 10 years old when both of her parents were killed in a hit-and-run car accident. Her father was just shy of his 40th birthday, and her mother was only 35. Unfortunately, neither of Sam's parents had relatives that could take her in. She would have to go to an orphanage when her parents died. Had it not been for one couple from their church, who she calls Mr. and Mrs. Banks. And while they had their... Sorry, apparently English is not working for me. This is after work hours. Anyway, so, and while they may have looked like a gracious couple on the surface, they were far from it. So let's talk about Mr. and Mrs. Banks. Mr. and Mrs. Banks went to the same local church that Sam had attended with her parents. After their tragic accident, Mr. and Mrs. Banks made this big to-do in the church. According to Sam's Reddit post on r/pro-revenge, she has a recollection of her foster parents saying that a little girl needs a loving home, and God has given us this joyous task to bring her up in our home and hearts. While it has been a long time and Sam doesn't remember their exact words, she knows they were something cringeworthy like that. The Banks actually had a daughter of their own whom Sam calls Kitty. Although Kitty was only a year older than Sam, she made no effort to welcome her new foster sister. According to Sam's post, she thought they would be super good friends, but Kitty had her own thing going and practically ignored me, to which Mr. and Mrs. Banks had nothing to say. She was a holier-than-thou type. It seemed as though this living situation wasn't going to be as simple as the Banks made it out to be. To make matters worse, it was clear that the Banks were just using Sam to build up their reputation in town. In public, Sam said the Banks would fawn over me in a sick cotton candy fashion that made me uncomfortable. In private, on the other hand, it was a completely different story. The Banks would also make Kitty behave nicely towards Sam around other people, which she undoubtedly resented. While they weren't exactly cruel to Sam, they took complete advantage of the situation without showing a single ounce of remorse. Whenever social workers would come to the Banks' residence to check up on Sam, Mr. and Mrs. Banks never failed to put on a big show. They'd coach me before the lady would come and tell me to praise how godly and wonderful they were, she said. After the social worker would leave, Sam's foster family would go right back to ignoring her. So while the Banks seemed like lovely people on the surface, Sam ultimately ended up in a loveless home. Financial help. Mr. and Mrs. Banks received a monthly stipend from the state to take care of Sam. In addition to that, they also received checks each month from Sam's biological father's estate, which were supposed to take care of her until she turned 18. Like I said, English is not working with me today. On her 18th birthday, Sam was set to automatically receive full control over her inheritance. Even as a tween and teen, Sam knew that the Banks were only using some of her endowment, both from the state and from my trust, to take care of me. So, where was the rest going? Even as a young child, Sam was aware that her foster parents would spend her biological father's money on trips and useless junk. As she got older, she could see that the Banks would pretend that business was going well for them, and that's why they had more money and could buy a new Volvo. Where I'm from, a new Volvo was an event. And take a trip to New York and buy fancy clothes for Kitty. By the time Sam was 17, she noticed that Mr. and Mrs. Banks were putting away her trust fund money in order to pay for Kitty's college tuition. Throughout this time, the Banks never directly said so, but they started heavily implying that Sam owed them. In other words, once she got control over her inheritance, she should give back for their generosity that they showed over the years. Some sort of material compensation for all the work they did to raise me. Get real. Sam posts continued to get very candid in the fact that Mrs. Banks basically stole all of her biological mother's antiques from the store and either kept them for herself, gave them to Kitty, or gifted them to other relatives. One thing that Sam's mother never kept at the store, however, was an extremely expensive and authentic china set worth tens of thousands of dollars. It was Sam's china set, of course, but Mrs. Banks thought I was an idiot and didn't know that. Because Sam always dressed like a tomboy, Mrs. Banks made the assumption that her foster daughter didn't care at all about her biological mother's antiques, especially the china set. That wasn't the case, though. As a kid, Sam was just taught that things were things and not to obsess over them. Having the china set for herself wasn't the issue. In reality, the issue for Sam was the fact that Mrs. Banks acted as if the china set was hers to give away. Wrong, lady. Once Kitty went off to college, thanks to my biological mom and dad's money, I had to make my own plans. Since Sam had always excelled in her studies, she received a partial scholarship to attend university out of state. She would use her inheritance, which she would soon have control over, to pay the rest of her tuition. Meanwhile, Mr. and Mrs. Banks were going on daily rants about how Sam owed them compensation since she was going to be rich soon and ought to share the wealth. Sam wasn't an idiot, though. She was well aware of the fact that the Banks got more than their fair share of her wealth. There was no way all the money they were receiving during all those years only went to Sam. Any time they gave Sam one of their guilt trips, she never promised anything. Instead, she simply nodded and smiled. Little did Mr. and Mrs. Banks know, however, that their foster daughter was scheming up her own plan for revenge. At that point, Sam had calculated that the Banks probably stole or misappropriated more than $200,000 of her parents' money over the last 7 years. Sam kept a tally of every single bank statement that her trust issued over the years. Since the Banks family never shared them with her, she asked the actual bank for a rundown. She also wrote down every single major purchase her foster parents made during those 7 years with money that was clearly beyond their means as a housewife and an insurance salesman. But how did Sam really get her sweet revenge? She waited for the church's yearly antique sale extravaganza, in which the Banks usually donated random stuff. Many of it knickknacks that used to belong to my mom and technically belonged to me. While the Banks were out shopping one day with my parents' money, she boxed up the china set and brought it to the church. She told the sales committee that her foster mother wanted to donate the priceless antiques for sale, all benefits to go to the church. This donation was made in the name of Mr. and Mrs. Banks. Sam told the committee, after all, if the Banks were so godly, then wouldn't she be absolutely delighted that such a gracious donation was made under her name? You would think so, but that was definitely not the case. Mr. and Mrs. Banks were set to work on the second day of the antique sale. Sadly, Sam wasn't there to see her plan work its magic, but she heard that when Mrs. Banks realized her foster daughter had donated the china set, she went ballistic. The china set had apparently been a huge hit at the sale, and the ladies from all over the county bought pieces from it. It ultimately raised a ton of money for the church, which Mrs. Banks didn't care about whatsoever. In a rage, she claimed that Sam had stolen the set from her house, while the ladies at the church explained that I had made the donation in her name, and she was getting credit for the donation to the church. According to what Sam had heard, her foster mother was practically yanking her hair out. She was trying to track down who had bought pieces and trying to get them back. Unfortunately, she never got those pieces back, but she did gain quite an ugly reputation with the town and church, who thought she was selfish and materialistic and acting very ungodly, especially the way she cursed her foster daughter. It looks like Sam's plan worked, but that wasn't all she had in store for her ungrateful foster parents. A week later, the Banks received a package from her attorney that contained a binder with all of their spending extravagances, every bank statement and purchase ever made with Sam's parents' money. Things like a car paid for in $40,000 cash, a used car for Kitty worth $20,000, trips to Hawaii, and the list goes on. The binder also contained a warning from my attorney that should they ever try to contact me again for money, that they will receive a bill and a court date. So eventually Sam managed to get her sweet revenge on the Banks. They took advantage of a young, innocent girl who had just lost both of her parents, but they didn't get away with it. She completely outsmarted both of them and ruined their reputations in their small town. 10 years later, Sam is now a third-grade teacher. She is married to an accountant, and together they have a 3-year-old son and a 1-year-old daughter. As for Kitty, she ended up working through college, according to Sam. As the two girls got older, they ended up reconnecting. Kitty apologized for the way she acted when they were kids. They are now friends and even see each other multiple times a year. Kitty is also an elementary school teacher and is married to an engineer. They have a 4-year-old daughter of their own. Both of our older kids play together when the families meet. It is clear that time has passed and Sam has moved on, because even in her post, she jokes about the fact that her and Kitty have their own wedding china. Kitty's relationship with her parents seems to be strained, as they're pretty much toxic. The Banks still live in that small town, and their reputation is, according to Sam, that couple who drove both of their children away and stole money from that poor little girl whose parents died. Sam might have had a tragic childhood, but she never gave up hope. Instead, she pushed herself through the hard times and used her brains to get out of an extraordinarily toxic situation. In 2019, she is now living her best life. She made amends with people from the past and cut off her former toxic relationships. In any event, Sam hopes your Volvo was worth it, Mr. and Mrs. Banks, and that is how you serve your revenge. Ice Coat. So that is the end of the article. So let's talk about it. This girl goes through one of the most tragic things that a 10-year-old girl can go through. She loses both parents at the same time in a horrific accident. Not only does she lose both parents at the same time, but she loses both parents at the same time and cannot get any justice because it's a hit-and-run accident. So no one is ever brought forth to serve for the crime of taking the life of both of her parents. And then this godly couple stands up in front of the church and makes a huge deal about how they're going to step forward. It was put in their heart by God to take up and raise this child. All they were seeing the entire time was dollar signs, because everybody in this small town knows everybody. So they knew that taking this young girl was going to mean they were going to get some money, because everybody knew that the family was wealthy. And they stole money from this young girl all of these years to benefit them. They got new vehicles, they got stuff for their daughter, they went on trips, all of it to benefit them and their child. Meanwhile, they were socially and emotionally cutting this child off. They stole not only money from her, but they also stole belongings from her mother's store, giving them to their own family members or keeping them for themselves. So they benefited in so many ways for their charity. And then as this child got older and they knew that their money train was ending, they kept harping on the fact that, well, we've taken care of you for so many years. You owe us. You owe us. When you get in charge of your money, you owe us. But they're godly people. This is the same problem that I have with religious fundamentalists, period. It's always you're with us or you're against us. And everybody always seems to owe them. This girl did not owe them anything. This money was not for them, it was for her. The money that she got from the state, they got from the state for taking care of her, and the money that they got from the trust fund to take care of her was for her. the expenses to take care of her. None of it was supposed to go to get them anything unless they needed a vehicle to get her back and forth places. None of it was supposed to go to their daughter. None of it was supposed to be for anything else but to take care of her needs. Medical needs, back to school clothes, educational needs, extracurricular activities, anything that she needed or wanted was supposed to be taken out of that money. And then anything else is supposed to be put in a bank account for her. But these godly people used it as a get-rich-quick scheme. But I love it because this girl got them back and got them back so good. Because she got their reputation. She took that china set, even though it was hers, she knew that she was not going to be able to walk out of that house with it because that woman was not going to let her walk out of that house with it. So she took it to the one place where she knew she could get that woman's reputation, which is the church. That woman went ballistic in the middle of the church and ruined her own reputation. Meanwhile, cussing this poor girl at the church. Then, a week later, she was smart. She wrote down everything that they bought with her parents' money. Everything. And then she went to the bank herself and was like, I want to see these bank statements. And she contacted her attorney and had him put together everything that she had written down and put together those bank statements and served them with that shit. That was brilliant. Brilliant. It was beautiful. Beautiful. That was so beautiful. That was just like that nail. Like, bye-bye. Beautiful. And then now, even, their own daughter. Okay, sorry about that, guys. But I also think it's very telling that the daughter, their own biological daughter, even agrees that these two are toxic people. And I do find that about a lot of religious fundamentalists, that they are very toxic people. These people that are very, very religious on the outset. Everybody believes that they are just so perfectly religious. On the outside, when you actually get to know them, they are very, very toxic people. But anyway, guys, that is what I think of this story. I think it is beautiful. I think this girl did a beautiful job. I'm so happy that things turned out well for her. I'm so glad she has a very happy life and that things turned out well for her. I'm also glad that her and her foster sister have a good relationship now and they are able to see that. Sorry again, guys. But I want to hear what you think in the comment section down below. Let me know what your thoughts are about this situation. What do you think of these two individuals? Do you think that they were right in this situation? Do you think that they were horribly wrong in this situation? And if you like this video, give it a thumbs up. If you haven't already, go ahead and subscribe and ring that bell so that you're notified every single time I upload a video. I am looking into some different types of content when I am covering some of these more religious-based videos. But anyway, guys, in the description box down below, I will have this article linked so you guys can go and look at it and read it for yourself. I did read the entire article in its entirety to you guys, but if you want to go back and read it yourselves before you make a comment, it'll be linked in the description box down below. Also, my Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and email are going to be linked down below. Facebook and Instagram, mainly all I do on those two platforms are just like, hey, new video up, come check it out. Twitter is more of a spicier place. I kind of do get into some debate type situations on Twitter. If you want to follow those situations, my Twitter is linked down below, so you can come follow me on that platform and see what I get up to on there. My email is linked down below. If you want to shoot me an email, if you have something that you want me to cover, you can send it to me there or on any of my platforms and I will get it. And anyway, guys, that's going to do it for this video, and I will see you on the next one. Bye for now.